Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar. My name is Mario Kiriakou. I'm one of the co-founders here at Ratio, and I'll be taking us through today's topic, how to digitize, engage, and personalize the client experience, and how we can support business development simultaneously. A little bit about us. We're a digital marketing consultancy. We work with a number of pro services firms and legal services firms looking at ways of enhancing the overall client experience to deliver a better experience, help clients identify information that they want quickly, identify the lawyers they want to engage with, and sort of close the loop in that disconnect between marketing and business development, so that marketing is a measurable factor in the supporting sort of sales process of your businesses. So what is the overall goal we wish to talk about during today's session? And one of the things I always come back to when we speak to people that we work with is in terms of sort of an overarching goal of where we'd like to take a legal services site to from where perhaps it is at the moment. It's about, and I'm going to talk about the offline side of the business, but it's about trying to build that trust with your client audience. We don't tend to see it. Obviously, it depends on the type of legal services firm that you are. If you're on the perhaps more on the consumer side, perhaps you're more lead generation focused. But if you're a firm that's focused more on the commercial side of legal services, then it tends to be less about pure lead generation. It's a combination of clients are aware of you within the market. We want to use digital channels to sort of reinforce and build that trust with them and with you as a firm, just so they are confident that perhaps you're the type of firm they wish to reach out to and speak to. Because ultimately, when your audience engages with you on your website, they have purely selfish goals in mind that they're looking to solve. They want to understand, from a business perspective, do you as a firm understand my business and the specific type of problems and challenges I may be facing? They want to understand what your practice and expertise strengths are and how these align with their day-to-day challenges. So, for example, are they focused on international expansion or mergers and acquisitions, for example, and how does your expertise, align with those sort of goals, for example? They will understand, importantly, why they should speak to you versus speaking to the competition, because they probably want to whittle down, the amount of firms they're potentially going to speak to. And ultimately, as a way of reinforcing, building that relationship with those individuals, they want to understand, is the content that you're producing as an organization relevant to them and to their sort of day-to-day challenges? But from an internal perspective, when we speak to marketing teams, obviously you have your own goals and challenges and things you are interested in. And the challenge is always to align your objectives, your problems and challenges with the goals you're trying to solve for clients. So we tend to see things such as, and these are things which come up in conversations, over the last couple of years with people we've worked with. For example, as an organization, perhaps you're producing, loads of content, loads of thought leadership content, but it's hard to understand from a digital perspective if it's driving value, if clients are engaging with it, if it's truly of interest. Especially if you work on the commercial side of legal services, you're very keen, especially from a digital perspective, to build those long-term relationships, to bring people back to your digital channels, to get them to engage with you so that if they have a need at some point, they're familiar with you and trust you. One thing that comes up time and time again is this desire for digital in legal to be more of a measurable business generator, so to understand how you can use digital to service opportunities. How can we better support business development? How can we provide them with information that's truly going to help them on their day-to-day basis? And ultimately, how do we deliver a relevant experience for our clients across, the multiple different channels that we may have at our disposal? And as a marketing team, you can sit back and look at what you should focus on. And like obviously there's, perhaps dozens of things which you could focus on. And sometimes that can be a challenge because half the battle is understanding where you should focus first. And where we see this come up when we speak to people, and we distill it as, big versus small changes in terms of when we're sitting down with people to sort of ideate and come up with those ideas that we think are going to move the needle on delivering a better client experience. It's easy to bucket in between the small things and the big things. But what does that mean in reality? Big things are not necessarily things you shouldn't do, but they tend to be things such as perhaps you have an outmoded, perhaps brand, digital experience. You're looking to overhaul the site design or improve the information architecture to help make it, I suppose, bring it perhaps up to line with how your business is at the moment. Perhaps you're looking to introduce a brand refresh. Perhaps you're looking at areas such as integrating with CRM systems. Perhaps you're looking to bring in a new email tool. So relatively chunky things which can have quite large requirements, perhaps require greater thought within the business, obtaining budgets and just more planning around those. And so the small side, and obviously this is not an exhaustive list because there's millions of things that you could potentially do which could add value. And to say something small is not necessarily saying it's going to be particularly easy. There could be lots of barriers that perhaps prevent you from doing something at the moment, but there's also ways of working around those. Just to pull out a couple, because we see this coming up in conversation quite often. Small things, again, which can quickly become quite a big thing. One of sort of the common denominators for we find when we look at the analytics across all legal services websites, is things around people bios is one of the most highly searched parts of the site. There's also one of the areas of the site that marketing teams want to look at ways of enhancing the experience, helping clients, find the right lawyer for the right service as quickly as possible, trying to bring people's bios alive, add a little bit more relevancy. Things which are small, but perhaps not necessarily easy. Things like how do we capture more relevant data? This could be a blocker for things like if you have a strict compliance team around the use of data, but of course there's ways around it. Things such as, do we have a good handle on what works in terms of can we measure what good looks like or what successful failure looks like and what doesn't, and how do we solve that? So where could we start? Well, there's lots of places you could start, but we always say to start, the easiest place to start is with your audience. And the reason why is because ultimately, if we're looking to create an optimal client experience, and again, just to, I suppose, to put this in the context, the way we look at this isn't trying to go from where you are now to where you want to be, like in a very short period of time. It could be about breaking it down into a bunch of smaller steps that helps move you to where you want to get to. But the reason why we always say let's start with the audience, because understanding your audience and I suppose their disparate needs that they have from a law firm is a good place to start, because you have different client groups, different client segments, you have different geographical regions that you serve, and each of those areas will have different requirements in terms of content and requirements around sector specialisms, for example. And the way we look at this is, if you were to go away after today's session and try and work on this, is to look at things such as creating audience maps. So trying to define who your audience segments are. So group your potential clients into different segments and try to understand what their needs are. We'll talk about a little bit about this in the next slide in a bit more detail. Talk about what you feel could be an exceptional experience. So what is the current experience and what would make that experience better for that client? It could be about moving a couple of friction points. It could be about making it just easier for them to find the information that's relevant. And so on, such as, one of the great areas we find, and one of the easiest, most cathartic things is for marketing teams, start the listing out from a client's perspective, placing yourself in their shoes as if you were the client visiting your site for the first time, to list out all of the frustrations that they could have or blockers that might prevent them from having a good digital experience. And an outcome of this could be, once you've listed those all out, is to list out, break this down by a single journey, a single client requirement when they visit the site, such as a client looking to obtain contact details for a specific lawyer who focuses on an area, and then breaking this down into 3 areas. What would make this a fantastic journey? What else do we think, from the user perspective, they would feel when they engage at this point? And what could potentially be frustrating about the current journey? And then we can break it down, such as, they want to find the right person as quickly as possible. They want to understand how that lawyer's experience aligns with that their specific goals on that day. What problem are they looking to solve? Can they understand a little bit more about that lawyer? Can you share additional content or context around their area of expertise? Thought leadership, white papers that they've authored. Do we understand what might be a frustrating part of an experience? For example, on lots of, I suppose, especially on the commercial side, you have the ability to contact lawyers directly from an email link in bios. What happens if a lawyer is out of office or on holiday? Is there a way of alerting them to, 1 or 2 other individuals within a team structure who could also pick up an urgent conversation? And what content is everyone interested in? I think one of the great things about law firms is in their ability to produce loads of really great content. You have lots of lawyers who are experts in their areas of the business, who know their areas of expertise extremely well, and they tend to enjoy producing content that talks about day-to-day challenges that they see when they deal with clients. But from a digital perspective, which content is of interest to a specific audience? And I think the suggestion is not always to to guide lawyers on the type of content they should be producing, because that can be quite difficult to guide. But I think from a marketing perspective, we want to understand what content we have and understand who is visiting a site at a given moment. Do we understand who they are? Can we profile them? And can we kind of build that content and connect the content to that individual? And one of the ways we look at this is around analyzing their needs. So looking at your clients, I suppose, less from an expertise and a sector specific, looking at your clients from the perspective of what are their roles. For example, there could be an in-house legal counsel for a massive pharmaceutical visiting your site, and she is looking at support around mergers and acquisitions, international expansion, patent disputes, for example. These are her challenges, and from her perspective, she wants to understand and feel reassured that you are the type of firm that solves those type of problems on a daily basis. So from her perspective, she wants to identify what type of content do you have that speaks to me about your expertise in solving those problems. Have you helped other firms in terms of patent disputes? What does that look like? Do you have rich, detailed information? And from a marketing perspective, can I identify someone's needs based on the type of information they're providing us when they engage with us, and connect the dots? But it isn't necessarily easy getting the digital experience right. It can be quite tough, which is why we always say we look at this from the perspective of a digital roadmap. So whatever your ambitions are, you shouldn't be put off if you feel the scale of the challenge to change something is quite big, because it can be broken down into small, manageable chunks, but that can be slotted into a larger overarching plan that you can see that over, say, perhaps 12, 24, 36 months, you can see the incremental improvements and the change in the digital experience. And one of the ways we look at this is to imagine from the client perspective, how they are treated with you as a firm offline. So what does the offline relationship look like between your lawyers and anyone else in the business who has direct relationships with your end clients? And the reason why we say this is a really good exercise, because that offline experience tends to be part of the reason why clients like working with your organization. They like the fact that it's a personal experience. You get to know them intimately, understand their day-to-day challenges. You look to build a long-term relationship. You look to solve problems on an ongoing basis, and you look to understand where you can add value along that sort of life cycle with that client. But from a digital perspective, how can we begin to mirror this offline relationship? Because that relationship is your business USP. Obviously, there's your partner's expertise and etc., and that's obviously fundamental. But it's about that. It's a relationship-driven business. So how can we turn your digital channels into almost a mirror image of how they will begin to engage with you offline? Now, one of the refrains we always hear is from organizations is that business development sales is something that happens offline. It's not really something that's driven by digital. It's driven by partners meeting, a potential client at an event, for example. But what we see as the role of digital is that it's not taken away from that dynamic. Sales is driven by personal relationships. It is driven by partners' expertise. But we see a strong crossover between the offline and the online world. Yes, your clients might be meeting and engaging with you as a firm offline, but then in parallel, they will be conducting research, because ultimately they will have several options. There'll be several of your competitors that you could also speak and work with. And what we see is clients in parallel researching your firm as they progress with those offline conversations. Which is why in digital, I'll just spin through to the end of this slide, which is why in digital we see opportunities with this offline-online divide to deliver a more optimal experience, to try and mirror that offline relationship, such as if we're able to recognize that people are researching specific named partners, can we identify thought leadership that they've authored and share that with individuals? Can we collect that sort of data when we are capturing people at the form subscription stage, so we can then provide that data? From a BI perspective, can we share that data of how prospective and existing clients are engaging with you, what they're searching for, what they're researching with other parts of your business? And some of the challenges that perhaps you've looked at that might be preventing you from exploring or tackling this, I suppose, as a challenge. So some of the things we hear on a regular basis, perhaps we don't know enough about our site visitors. Yes, we have perhaps Google Analytics, but we don't really know who is someone sitting behind that, those individual visits. What are they truly interested in? The type of experience we're providing is, I suppose, a one-size-fits-all. It's tailored to every segment. It's not, I suppose, tailored to an individual's needs. Perhaps we're missing potential opportunities within our amongst the audience who engage with us on a monthly basis. It's difficult to anticipate client needs and therefore the type of content you should provide in. And measuring the impact of marketing can be quite difficult within a legal services firm where perhaps you're not focused on a hard outcome such as a lead generated. In that context, what does success look like? And some of the solutions that we see to some of these problems can include examples such as providing clear value exchange in terms of registration. Half the challenge is trying to encourage a larger percentage of your audience to provide their details, so you have an opportunity to build that sort of long-term digital relationship with them. Can we incrementally capture more first-party data on our individuals? There's a whole separate conversation around, the use of that data and, compliance within your organization, how comfortable you are with the use of that data. But ultimately, the more we know about a client, the more we can potentially use that data to deliver a more relevant digital ongoing experience. Can we track their on-site and offline behavior? This could be things through such as, integrating CRM systems, such as, perhaps the Future platform that lots of law firms have. So we can then understand where someone is in terms of a sales cycle or in terms of an engagement cycle with, an offline team, and how that marries up with their online searches. Can we begin to surface opportunities for sales and marketing? So from a marketing perspective, in terms of, understanding what a better experience could be and what we could change to perhaps a page layout? And can we begin to understand what financial contribution that marketing is influencing as part of an overall potential engagement with the client? And the way we look at this is, from a website perspective, we always call this, every client who engages with you leaves behind a little nugget of information. From the inbound side, from traffic acquisition, we can track, what type of channels drove someone to your site. Are you running LinkedIn campaigns? Are you running external, digital events which are driving people to your site? When people engage with you across your site, we can begin to profile and understand, with the right sort of marketing tools in place, how they're interacting with you as a business. What components, what parts of the site are they clicking on? What are their search queries? What information are they really interested in on an individual basis? And then leveraging that information to orchestrate the overall digital experience. So take a really simplified linear example. They refer back to that example of the in-house legal counsel for that large pharmaceutical company. She's researching potential new firms, or she's having some of her team do this for her. That individual may visit the site for the first time, view some content, disappear, return a couple of months later, browse some more content, perhaps complete a form. And perhaps after a while, they may initiate a conversation with your business development teams. And at some point in the future, they may purchase some services. But what does this look like in terms of orchestrating their digital experience? Well, I mentioned in the slide before that when visitors come to your site, they leave behind nuggets of information around what they're potentially interested in, which we can infer from those journeys, and we can provide a tailored experience. So, for example, perhaps we was able to identify the company IP, so we knew which firm this person was coming from, and they're coming from a pharmaceutical company. Could we then personalize the initial website experience based on that? So perhaps promoting some examples of pharmaceutical thought leadership across different parts of the site to bring forth the idea or the point that you're an expertise. This is an area of business that you are intimately familiar with. Can we then trigger an email once we've captured their data based on information that we know about them? So again, providing up-to-date thought leadership around their specific sector and the specific challenges, and then combining that with data passed over to your CRM system. Because ultimately, the way we look at it is you typically at your disposal have a bunch of tools which provide you with the ability to deliver an improved experience at different touch points. And from our perspective, it's about identifying what those engagement points are, what are those trigger points, what can we list out the parts of a user journey for a specific audience. when they capture information, when they visit the site, when they download a piece of thought leadership, when was the last time they engaged with someone offline, and where can we insert a digital change into that overall journey. Another part of improving the overall client experience from our perspective is around areas such as the social advocacy program. And we see this with some of our clients who put in place the tools and processes to maximize your greatest resource, which is your people, the lawyers and experts who work within the business, to amplify their message and content that they create to drive more awareness of your firm and your expertise, and ultimately to bring more relevant and targeted traffic and potential prospective customers to your website. Because ultimately, content shared by the business is great, but as we all know as individuals, content shared by other individuals will drive greater reach than any sort of corporate channel. And a simplified way of looking at this, and we've got examples from some of our clients who have done this on quite a sophisticated scale, is to look at things such as having a content plan in place for their advocacy program, making it really easy for your lawyers to share content out to their social media channels. Perhaps look at starting with one sector or one division of your business. Though I appreciate sometimes that can be politically problematic if other areas of business feel like they're being missed out. Look at defining what is success for that type of rollout before expanding that to a larger part of your business. We've talked about measurement and that sometimes it can be quite difficult to define what success looks like. So we're going to just talk about a little bit about that now. And one of the areas we always talk about is look to develop a measurement plan, which is ultimately looking to close the gap between what you are looking to achieve from a business perspective and what you, from a marketing point of view, are looking to achieve on a day-to-day basis in terms of the channels that you control and the experiences that you're looking to deliver. So ultimately, we can actually begin to close the gap between what you're looking to achieve as a business. Perhaps you're looking to grow a new service line or expand into a new geographical region, and then bring that and connect those dots with the ultimate perhaps digital goals that will drive those endpoints. So one of the things we always say is, yes, perhaps you're not so focused on lead gen. People are searching for people bios and then emailing people direct or clicking on a telephone number and calling. But all of these areas, if we can identify that they're what success looks like from a client and business point of view, these are things which can be measured and tracked and brought into I suppose the marketing sphere of overview in terms of knowing what's happening on a day-to-day basis and how does this fit into the larger objective that we're trying to achieve. And one of the things we always say is, then once you've done that, you can look to develop a measurement framework. It's something we do, we've done this, thousands of times. Each one is highly tailored to an organization because every law firm is different. You have your own nuances, but ultimately, as I said in the slide before, we want to close the gap between that overall digital website, digital objective, those individual website goals, and then close the gap between what are those KPIs that could begin to define what success looks like. And tracking your clients' digital footprints. We mentioned this before, that every time a client visit the site, they leave behind sort of a nugget of information or first-party data. And the opportunity about this, and we're talking about this now because as part of the presentation title was, how can we also support business development, but also partners with, sales intelligence. The opportunity around this is we can begin to identify key digital touch points. We can put that tracking in place, aligned with those measurement frameworks. We can look to understand where that data is held. Is it in a CRM system? Is it in a platform like Future, for example? Do we have the right technology in place, or do we need something else? Oftentimes we see clients actually have lots of the right tools in place. So this is just, a generic example. You might have a different content management system, a different CRM system, a different email platform. It doesn't really matter really. But one of the things we always look at is to look at what systems you have in place, look at the capabilities of those systems, look at how you're using those capabilities, and whether there's anything else that's missing. Look at the type of journeys that you are looking to create, and understand whether those platforms are capturing the type of information that you need to influence those journeys, and whether they have the capability to then deliver on that type of experience. And everyone's favorite thing, no one likes hearing the phrase, "Oh, marketing doesn't, it's not marketing that's driving value to the business. It's all, offline, it's all business development." And again, this isn't I think, legal services conundrum. This is a thing, I think, generic to B2B businesses, that there is a perennial gap between marketing and sales. So let's just take a moment to explore how we could begin to close that gap. From a digital perspective, what information are we providing that could be highly relevant to other parts of the business? And actually, when you begin to distill and break it down and investigate the type of information you may potentially capturing on your prospective customers, it could be quite a lot, and it could be highly relevant and highly interesting to your colleagues sitting in, a business development team, for example. You might be able to understand, what companies are visiting the site. This could be highly relevant because your offline teams may be conducting, a big pitch to win a new piece of business, and you may be able to identify that, company X is visiting the site and researching X, Y, Z. Is that information interesting or relevant? We can understand where people are coming from, the type of content that's being consumed, what goals are being triggered, how often they're coming back. I won't list everything because actually those are just some of the highlights. There's an enormous, I think, wealth of information to potentially be capturing from a digital perspective. But that information is all well and good, but actually it needs to be shared and broken down into a format that is highly digestible, highly shareable, but more importantly, from, I suppose, a sales and marketing perspective, if you was to receive this information, it needs to be in a format that makes sense to an individual. What am I meant to glean from this information? How would this change up my approach to what I do next? That could be a marketing campaign, or perhaps it changes up how what I might say next in a client conversation. The example on the side screen is an example from one of our actual clients, a pro services firm, where all of their data is being visualized across, sort of a wealth of different types of dashboards that focus on the key things that are important to them. And there's something similar you can do, and then democratize and share that information with the wider part of the business. Well, that brings me to the end of today's session. This is a topic I talk about at great length. We talk about this with all our legal services and pro services clients, so something which I'm always happy to talk about. For anyone on the call, if you have any questions, feel free to drop these questions into the Zoom question bar on your screen, and I will endeavour to get back to you with as detailed an answer as possible in the next couple of days. If anyone on the call is interested in the sort of things where I spoke about today, we are offering areas such as, things such as, free digital experience audits for all attendees today. So what we look to do is, gain access to your GA analytics, for example, and then do a minimized sort of a smaller version of what we covered off today. So at the end of it, you get a bunch of insights into where you are as a firm, where do you sit now, and what are those opportunities that you could leverage from the insights that we find. So if anyone's interested in that, my email address is on the screen. I'm sure everyone will get a follow-up email with a recording of today's session as well. But it just leaves me to say thank you, everyone, for joining today's session. And yeah, enjoy the rest of the week. So bye-bye.